Have you ever created a business plan? I mean, you did all the research, you added in all the details, you know it's something that will work in today's market, but you just filed it away on your computer and never pulled it up again. Maybe you've written a manuscript, you put your heart and soul into it, and you know that this is a message that needs to get out to the world, but again, it's just filed away on your computer somewhere, never to be seen again. Well, if you find that you are creating things that you know have a significance in the world that we're in today, but you just can't take that final step to release them, is it possible that you're dealing with a mindset of perfectionism, all the while thinking that you're waiting on the right time so that you can move in excellence? Hello, welcome to The Journey. I'm Aurora. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm so excited about our topic. Today we're going to talk about perfectionism versus excellence. And we have been in somewhat of a series. We started out talking about anxiety versus unction. Then we moved on to OCD versus true spiritual devotion. I hope you were able to watch those videos. If you haven't and they piqued your interest, make sure to go back and check them out. I think they'll bring a great level of freedom and insight into your life. But today we're talking about perfection versus excellence. You know, it's so easy to mask unhealth as spiritual virtue. Because what lies underneath that unhealth is not the action that we perform, it's the motive from which we perform it. And it's very easy to not have a clear, honest understanding of the motives that cause us to act in certain ways. So we have been shining that light, not diagnosing, not trying to convince anyone of their mental or emotional state, but just shining a light for those that could say, hey, that's me, and I'd love to be free from that. So today we're moving on, perfection versus excellence. Am I exhibiting the virtue of excellence or being driven by perfectionism? We're going to talk about what perfectionism is and what excellence is and how to tell the difference between the two and how to frame our mind and motives in ways that frees us from performing out of perfectionism and gets us into a place of moving in a true spirit of excellence, which we will see is actually motivated by love. So let's talk about what perfectionism is. Perfectionism. Now, this is kind of a long definition. Give some good insight though, just so that we can locate where we are. And if you just Google, you'll find these same results. Perfectionism is a personality trait characterized by setting excessively high standards for oneself and others, accompanied by harsh self-criticism and fear of failure. While it can involve a drive for excellence, it differs from healthy ambition because it is often rooted in fear of judgment or shame and can lead to negative outcomes like anxiety, depression, and exhaustion. Perfectionism can manifest in three types: self-oriented, other-oriented, and socially prescribed, with the latter being a growing concern, especially among young people. And I'm assuming that's because of social media. So, characteristics of perfectionism: setting unrealistic standards, holding oneself and others to impossibly high, often unattainable standards. Next, harsh self-criticism, being overly critical of mistakes and feeling worthless when standards are not met. And that can be overly critical of our own mistakes and overly critical of the mistakes of others. Next, fear of failure, procrastinating or avoiding tasks due to fear of not performing them perfectly. That's what we talked about in the intro. You did all the work, you did all the labor, but just can't take that next step of putting it out into the world because it's just not perfect yet. Next is sensitivity to criticism, being highly sensitive to negative judgments from others. And honestly, those judgments really probably come most from within, where we are judging ourselves. Now, here's the important part. This is the impact perfectionism has on well-being. It affects our mental health. Perfectionism is linked to an increased risk of developing conditions such as depression, anxiety, and eating disorders. It affects our physical health. The chronic stress associated with perfectionism can lead to sleep disruption, burnout, and even contribute to chronic inflammation, which we know results in pain. Next, it affects our functioning. It can negatively affect daily functioning, personal relationships, work, and school. And finally here, our self-worth. Perfectionists may experience feelings of shame, guilt, and low self-esteem, as their sense of worth is tied to their accomplishments. Now, forgive me for stumbling over the word perfectionism and perfectionist. That is kind of a hard word to say, especially repeatedly. Say it 3 times fast and then let me know. Okay, so moving on. Now, we've talked about perfectionism, what it is, some of the traits and the way that it affects us negatively. And remember, it's the motivation. It's motivated by fear, and it's motivated by rejection, fear of being rejected by others, and even the fact that maybe we have already rejected ourselves. So there's good news. Just hang on just a minute. So excellence. Okay, now this is my definition of excellence. You can look it up in the dictionary and it will say something having to do with being very good. Okay, and I like that definition as well. But this is my definition of excellence as it pertains to us functioning as people of excellence or functioning in excellence. So what is excellence? Doing the best with what you have. Doing the best with what you have to the glory of God. That really sums it all up in my opinion. And 1 Corinthians 10 verse 31 says, so whether you eat, drink, or whatever you do, do it all to the glory of God. And you see how that removes me from the center of it, and it actually puts bringing God's goodness and glory to the front and center. So it removes the pressure off of me because I'm just doing the best with what I have. And for me, that's going to look different than how it looks for you, because you may have more than me. You may have more resources, ability, time, and all of those things. So your excellence is going to be different from my excellence. So it's not measured based on the outcome. It's measured based on the motive and the intention of the heart. Now, perfectionism flows from a deficit, not fully believing that you're enough or that others view you as enough. Therefore, we have to prove to others and ourselves that not only are we enough, we're more than enough. Because we can't just be as good as others. Sometimes we feel like we've got to be better than others. And that's when enough is never enough. Because there's no bottom or floor or foundation for our accomplishments to rest on. No matter what we do, achieve, or attain, they just fall and sink into that hole of self-doubt and fear, because there's no solid foundation there, because we're constantly trying to prove out of the fact that we already don't believe that we are enough or that we're good enough. We're trying to prove who we are based on what we do rather than resting in who we are based on what God has said about us and accepting His word and His opinion of us as truth. We have to understand that we're no better than the next person, and we're no worse than the next person, and no person is better or worse than us. All of us have our gifts, abilities, and talents, and our own unique identities given to us by God. But one is not more significant or important than the other. God is the creator. He's the craftsman, and He's the designer. And He gave to each one of us as He saw fit, as He desired. Any pride concerning who we are or what we do is a full-fledged acknowledgement that we don't understand that God made us who we are and gave us the ability to do what we can do. Now, sometimes when we think pride, we think boastful. But pride, it really can be seen in other ways as well, because if I'm focusing on myself, yes, I'll probably be boasting and showing everyone and telling everyone how great I am. But at the same time, on the other end, if I'm focusing on myself, I'll be frozen and paralyzed in fear because I'm focused on what my own personal limits are, what I can, what I can't do, and how I'm not sufficient enough. That's still another form of being self-focused. So it can result in a number of ways. It's not just the loud and boastful. It could be the paralyzed and afraid. But the bottom line is we have to know that God gave us what we have. He gave us our abilities. And He also didn't give us what He didn't give us. And we have to accept that as well. I will never probably be able to play professional WNBA basketball. I'm just not that tall. God didn't give that to me, okay? So coming to terms with what He gave us and what He didn't give us helps us to have a sense of peace and contentment in life as well. Now, obviously, we can learn new skills. We can grow what He's given us. There are things that we can take on and expand as we mature. But there's a bottom line foundational gifting and DNA design that God has given us. And that was according to his own plan and his own purpose. So when we know and accept that, it allows us to flow and function in humility and be okay saying, I can do that and I cannot do that. Now, excellence flows out of fullness. So perfectionism flows out of deficit, lack, fear, but excellence flows out of fullness, already knowing that you are enough, that you are accepted, and that all things are working together for your good. Understanding that my best today is not the same as my best tomorrow, but I can only use what I have today. I only know what I know today. I only have access to what I have access to today. It comes from a motivation of expressing what's already inside of me, which is the fullness and the excellence of God, rather than trying to prove to myself and to others who I am and what I can do. Excellence has a focus on creating something for more than just my own self-fulfillment and acknowledgement, though I will get to enjoy it myself. But that's not the end goal. It's for what it creates for me. But creating or producing something for others to enjoy and for the world to benefit from, that's a different motivation. It's more outward focused. I'm not bypassing me because I do get to enjoy and benefit from it as well. But the end result is what I am putting out into the world for others to benefit from and to enjoy as well. Now, perfectionism disguised as excellence can thread itself throughout all aspects of our lives. When we understand that our lives are a reflection of God to others, we can feel this misplaced responsibility of being superhuman at all times. I know none of you all have ever felt that, but we might feel like I've got to be the perfect wife. I have to be the perfect father. I have to be the perfect business owner. I have to be the perfect friend, the perfect customer, the perfect son, the perfect daughter, the perfect minister. And the list goes on. With this mentality fueling our thoughts and actions, we can easily become rigid, exhausted, and burned out. And the judgment we pass on ourselves for not meeting these lofty expectations will inadvertently begin to be passed on to others, whether we ever say anything about it or not. So now let's talk about some of the distinctions between excellence and between perfectionism. We'll look at them side by side. So excellence focuses more on the final outcome or the product and how it's going to benefit others. But perfectionism focuses on how that final product is going to reflect on me. What will people think of me when they see or experience this? Next, working and flowing from a motivation of excellence brings with it a life-giving energy. But perfectionism is draining because it's rooted and motivated by fear and results in anxiety. Next, excellence gracefully handles disruptions to the plan because it's not depending on the project to provide a sense of self-worth and esteem, and focuses on what has been produced and not what hasn't. Perfectionism, though, crumbles, blames, and quits when things don't go as expected because this perceived failure is tugging on that deep root of fear of not being good enough, and this disaster only confirms that this fear is true. Oof. Now, one of the greatest principles that we can keep in mind concerning this idea that we have to be perfect for others at all times because we reflect God, I believe it's here, found in Hebrews chapter 4, and it's verses 14 through 16, and I'll read it here from the Passion. It says, "So then we must cling in faith to all we know to be true, for we have a magnificent King Priest, Jesus Christ, the Son of God, who rose into the heavenly realms for us and now sympathizes with us in our frailty. He understands humanity. For as a man, our magnificent King Priest was tempted in every way just as we are and conquered sin. So now we come freely and boldly, so to where love is enthroned, to receive mercy's kiss and discover the grace we urgently need to strengthen us in our time of weakness." And I memorized that scripture many years ago in the King James Version. But it says that we have not a high priest who cannot sympathize with our weaknesses, but who was in all points tempted as we are, yet he was without sin. Therefore, let us come boldly to the throne of grace. So Jesus did have a ministry of perfection. Obviously, he did. He was God here in the flesh. And he did present himself perfectly and whole before the Father. But he also had a ministry of humanity. He was tempted in all points as we are, yet he was without sin. And you know, knowing that, the scripture goes on and says, therefore is there for a reason. It's there because Jesus can identify with our human frailty and our weakness. And so we can come to him with a full open heart without being ashamed or afraid, because we know that he identifies with and understands us. And when we are able to live with humility and vulnerability and not feel the need or pressure to present only perfection at all times, it actually creates a safe space for other people as well. Not just to come to us, although we might be a doorway, but it really is a safe space for them to come to Christ. Because if we are reflecting Christ, we're not just reflecting him in perfection, we're reflecting him also in our humanity. And we can tell them, look, I'm not perfect. I do the best I can with what I have. And God accepts me, not because of who I am or what I do, but because of what his son Jesus did. And even though I stumble, even though I may fall and I may not get everything right all the time, I am fully loved and fully accepted by my Father. And you can be too. What a beautiful ministry that we have to offer other people. Being humble and vulnerable enough to show people our imperfections can be more of a ministry to them than showing them that we are perfect and without fault. Jesus is approachable, one, because he understands our frailty, which provides us with a sense of boldness in coming to him. We can offer the same to others. When we don't hide ourselves in perfectionism, but rather flow and function from excellence, which is motivated by love, love for God, love for others, and love for ourselves, we allow them to see our imperfection, which communicates to them that if there's room for us, then there's room for them too. Let Jesus be the perfect one. Jesus is the one that lived a perfect, sinless life. We, on the other hand, yes, we're living a life of maturity, love, and faith in him. But there are times where we will not meet that standard of perfection and excellence that we think that we should. And that's okay. We don't have to hide that. So if you've been listening to the video today and you can identify with some of these things and you realize that perfectionism is affecting you negatively, even though you thought that you were really just functioning and flowing in a biblical standard of excellence, if this hit home today, just reposition and readjust your mind. Begin to dig into what God has said about you and learn that you are enough and that you are accepted and that you are complete in him and that none of your accomplishments are making you good enough for God or even good enough for others. When you really get that rooted, grounded, and established, then you can begin to flow from a motivation of love. And that flow and that motivation is going to bring life and it's going to bring energy onto all of the things that you do. And you'll be willing to put things out before others that could help them, even if they're not yet perfect. Because honestly, when we're waiting on that perfect moment, we're really probably waiting so that we can look perfect in front of others. But we don't have to. We can move in excellence and do the best with what we have today to the glory of God and the benefit of others. Thank you so much for joining me today on the journey. God bless you. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.